Today's video we'll be talking about different ways to achieve multicolor prints using a single extruder printer. So let's get into it. Alright, so the single extruder options we're going to go over to make multicolor prints today include color shifting or color change, multicolor, glow in the dark, temperature shift, and filament pause. So let's take a look. Alright, so I thought Amazon would be an easy way to show some of these filaments. So this one is a color shift PLA, and I will show a printed part after this. But basically what it is it's a spool of filament. So one spool is all you need, and it will change as you move through the roll. So basically the more you print, the color will shift. And changing the infill can also affect how fast this shifts. So they show this part here shifting pretty quickly. I'll show a part in a second that I printed that really only shifts between a couple colors. If you're normally printing at 10 to 20% infill, you're going to use up a lot less filament. So you can kind of make it shift faster by using a lot higher infill rate, but then you're burning more filament. So achieving some of this shift is difficult, but it looks better on bigger parts. So this is an example of a color changing PLA in that it changes over time. As I mentioned previously, you can address this a little bit by adding more infill. This is a 20% infill, but you can see this dog, which it's not a tiny piece, but you can see it only changed in two colors. It kind of started off as a green and moved into a gold. So that's one thing to keep in mind is it's a neat feature, but you can't really control how far it changes and what features are what color unless you cut down a bunch of your filament. And even then, depending on the size of your piece, you're going to use more or less of the filament. So again, it's neat since it's a single filament, doesn't require any changes, but there are some limitations with that color changing aspect. So this is an example of a multicolor PLA that's kind of a directional PLA. So this is, I think, a good way to look at it. So if you're looking at the filament, if you were to slice the roll kind of head on, this is kind of how it's divided. So essentially it's three different colors spliced together, and it kind of blends at the edges where each color occurs. So it's a single filament again, but it changes color based on the direction. So the whole print is the same color theoretically on the same side, and I'll show you when that's not always the case. But essentially going back to this one, if this is your left side, the left side's always going to be green, right side's always going to be orange, back is always going to be blue as it prints. So it's a really kind of neat way to achieve a cool multicolor effect, because again, they've got some dragons printed here. As you can kind of see, the front of the horns might be purple, but then the back and sides are teal. So it's a really neat effect that is achieved by just a single filament. So no pauses or cuts or anything. It's a neat effect. They've got multiple options. I've seen tricolor. I don't know that I've seen the quad color option yet. There's options with just two colors. I have several of those. So definitely recommend. I've never had any issues printing it. I guess besides one where I'll show you an issue with the print here. But again, a neat effect. Comes in silk and matte from a lot of different companies. All right, these are some different examples of a multicolor filament. So this is a matte red and black from Polymaker. As you orient the part, it'll change how it prints. So if I were to print the horns differently, this red and black would be in different locations, because it's always, I'll say should always be on one side, and we'll talk about that in a second, but basically it'll always print essentially a left side the red and the right side the black. And then there's multiple examples of this. There's different silk PLAs that you can use with a lot of different color combinations. There's kind of unicorn horn that goes from green to blue, and then those are all two colors. And then this is a tricolor, which you can see it's got a blue, a green, and like a purple. So as you rotate, it kind of blends between all of those three. And the reason I said usually prints, you can see here as I threaded this in, it started a different way, and then at one point it snaps. I actually have that recorded on video, so we'll show that in a second here. But you can see it doesn't ruin the piece exactly, but it really kind of takes away from the whole point of having one side one color and one side the other. This is just a very definitive line. I've not had this with most of my printers, but I have a Ender 3 SE that I've had it happen on a couple of times, where it seems like as I thread it in, it must not be the neutral position. So at some point, when it's pulling the filament in, it rotates in the nozzle, and you get this effect. So that's something to keep in mind. And maybe if I had printed, stopped it, and come back and reset it, I think it would have been fine because obviously the bulk of this is one color. All right, so this is the recording of the egg I just showed. So you can see it is now blue where it's circled right here. So clearly it's printing the correct color here. So we're going to watch it. It's frozen right now. We're going to watch it speed up and then watch it shift to the red here in a second. Here we are, sped up. And then we will pause. And now you can see it has shifted to the red. So sometime in that change, somehow the filament flipped and rotated and changed the piece. So this is an example of kind of multiple things. I have some glow-in-the-dark filament, which I will show parts again from a second, in both the TPU and a PLA. This actually kind of combines a color changing uh, and glow in the dark effect all in one. They do have just normal glow in the dark filaments as well. Similar to the multicolor one, you do have to be concerned with how fast this is going to shift. So in my experience, I do have this version. It changes, but again, it's a little subtle because glow in the dark isn't as vibrant as a normal PLA or TPU. And then also you're not getting a massive amount of color change on a single part. But there's a lot of different glow in the dark colors out there. I think the brightest that glows is usually the green, but there's a lot of different other colors out there as well. So I just chose this brand kind of at random. I've printed a couple of their filaments and had good luck. Uh, but similar to any glow in the dark thing, it's not going to glow on its own. It's going to have to charge with either sunlight or a other light source. But again, a neat effect with a normal looking print that can change once you have the lights off. So very cool. So due to its color, this doesn't show up really well on camera. This is a ghost book Nook, if you can kind of see that I printed. And I'll turn the lights off here in a second so you can see everything. So this is in a solid PLA, and this is printed with infill. And one thing to watch out on that is if you don't have enough walls, which I think this is only built with 2 walls, you'll see the infill pattern glow through the side. And then also this is a dog colors. This is my dog Kismet's color. My wife makes these charms. I'll link her Etsy shop in the description here. But so this is printed without any infill. So this is a solid little chunk of TPU. So this will glow basically solid since there's no infill. So I'll turn the lights off here and see if these glow pretty well on camera. Okay, I was able to adjust the brightness on the camera so you can see here we've got a nice green glow for Kismet. And then this, you can see the ghosts now glowing. I didn't see the side, but if you look closely, you can see down here some of the infill pattern coming through. A little tricky to see. Camera's struggling to pick this up here. But so this is glow in the dark filament. It'll glow pretty well for a while. Again, like any glow in the dark thing, you have to charge it, but it does last for a good little while. It's got a neat effect. Again, I was really happy with how this ghost Nook turned out. I'll link the file for this one as well. So this is a color changing filament in that it changes color with different temperatures. There's a variety of these. I don't have this version, but there's different ones, and they'll usually give a setting at where it changes color. So this one is 33C, um, and then there's different ones which will be quite warm. But there's different temperature gradings, and you can look at different ones, but they'll change from, I've got one that changes from an orange to a yellow. That's actually a TPU, but there's a variety of different temperature gradients. Uh, I don't use this one very much. Again, I only have the one, but it is, again, kind of a neat thing if you had kind of something outdoors that you're trying to check the temperature on, or a plaque that if it oscillates during an ambient temperature change, there could be kind of a cool effect that you want to do with this one. I haven't found a personal application for it, but it's something I've kept in mind as something I kind of want to do in the future. But it, again, single filament, changes color with temperature. It's a very basic, easy to use, so single extruder. Don't have to worry about many things. And the one I do have, again, even though it's TPU, I didn't have any issues running it. No special setup from my end. So just a neat effect to be aware of. So this is actually the only color changing temperature related filament that I have. It's a TPU, and you can see it goes from an orange to a yellow, kind of where I've been holding it here. It's a bit more yellow. It's a little bit warm in the studio right now, so it's a little bit more yellow than it is orange. But again, it will change at relatively normal conditions around 70 Fahrenheit from one to another. So as you heat it up a little bit above that, it will change. There's a variety of these on both PLA and TPU, so I don't really have a lot of use for this, but it is kind of a neat feature that's, again, a single roll of filament that'll change color. All right, I've got my token STL pulled up in Cura here, and we're going to walk through how to make this have a pause that we can change the filament out. So first we need to slice this. I've got my layer height set to 0.2 because the way you design this, I know that there's a millimeter of edge here, and the same with the number. So I know I can have multiple layers here with that 0.2 thickness, 5 layers to give it some good contrast. So we've got it sliced. We're going to click on preview. And what we need to do is determine what layer where we want to have our pause. So I want it to pause basically right before we start doing that edge in the number. So you can see right here at layer 10, there's no number. If we go up to layer 11, it starts to do the number and then that final edge wall. So to do this is go to extensions, post processing, modify G code, and then we're going to add a script. We're going to add pause at height. We're going to pick the layer number is correct, and then we're going to pick 10 since that's going to pause once it finishes that layer. So what this does in your G code is it'll run, it'll complete layer 10, and then it'll go and kind of park essentially and wait for you to press a button. Now this doesn't work on the Anycubic printers I have because it seems like it requires a click-through button and a touch screen. It won't register correctly, but on any of my Creality printers, this works just fine. So I set it to the layer after I want to change it. So between layer 10 and 11, it'll pause at the end of the layer. And then another thing to watch out for here is the standby temperature. If this is set to 0, it'll park itself and then it'll just cool down. So trying to get the filament out will be difficult. So I always set this to 200 degrees if I'm using PLA. And then that's really all you need to do for, this is the park. So basically parks in the back right here is where it's set to as default, and that works fine for me. So yeah, so that's basically the pause function. And then once this is done, you close out. You'll need to reslice it. And this won't show up anywhere apparently in the preview, but this little box down here will show that you've got a added script in there. So again, once you take this G code and put it on your printer, start it up in your base color, and then once it hits the pause layer, swap it over to a different color. And you can stack this multiple times, like the more elaborate coaster I showed you that involved multiple pauses. So there's certainly more colors you can do than just 2. All right, so I really like the pause method or using 2 prints kind of printed over each other. I think it's really great for things like tokens where you can create some great contrasting images. These are some tokens I printed for 40K, some objective markers. I've done generic tokens as well, but you can do more complicated designs. This is a coaster, but this involves multiple pause layers, but this is achieved through layering multiple filaments together, going from a dark blue into a white and also a light blue. This is actually a file from Thingiverse. I will link this in the description, but it's a really neat, intricate design using just a pause method. Now you can see on this thicker one, it will create from the side a kind of a 2-color or multicolor view from the side, but from the top, it really makes it pop. And this is useful for PLA, but also works for things like TPU. So this is a leaf sleeve that printed as well. So again, it's flexible, but it still keeps all the pieces together. So definitely fairly easy to do once you kind of know the settings that you're working with. I also have a more detailed video on that. I'll link in the description if the people want to look into that. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoy some multicolor prints in the future. Please like and subscribe for more. Thanks.